to make 3-layered Ankara skirts, and these are the necessary things that would be needed for the process. The 3 African prints are of different designs, and even the lining, as you can see, is of different color. That is because there are different pieces from different fabrics I've used in the past, and I'm putting it together to make this particular layered skirt. And I'm even using this color of lining that is not even part of it. Don't judge me. So let's get started. First things first, these are all the measurements needed for the skirt, and we're going to be using our hip measurements to determine how large or how big we want the skirt to be. So I'm taking my hip circumference, which is the biggest part of my body, and I'm going to be adding about 15 inches. That is 15 inches plus my hip circumference is going to determine how full the skirt is going to be. And then you're also going to measure the length of the skirt of preference. For me, I'm taking 18 inches, and within this 18 inches I'm going to be taking out the band for the waist. I'm doing 1.5 inches for the band, so I'm taking that out before measuring the full length of the skirt, which is 18 inches. So I'm going to take that out on the lining and then measure the complete, that's the full length, which is 18 inches on the lining before cutting it out. I hope you all understand my explanation. What I mean is, plus the band, the length of the skirt is 18 inches, so I'm taking out the 18 inches. After measuring and cutting the part of the lining that will be needed for the skirt, in which I said the length is 18 inches and the breadth is your hip circumference plus 15 inches. So in total I have 18 inches. But when I take out the band, I will be having, the band is 1.5, I'll be having 16.5 inches. So that would be the length for the skirt. I already said the breadth is your hip circumference plus 15 inches. It depends on how you want it. The 15 inches is not constant. You can decide to add and you can decide to reduce it. So after cutting and setting apart the lining, so up here we have the waistline and down there we have the hemline. So I'm going to be dividing the 16 inches by 3 because we have 3 different fabric. If you have 4 or 5, you divide it by how many fabric you have. And I have 5.5, and I'm chalking it where the demarcation occurred, the 3 demarcation that was taken. That is where I'm chalking, and I'm going to use my meter rule to line it so I can see it properly. That is what I'm saying, and it's going to be lined all around the lining. So I'm going to chalk it all around the lining. This is what I am trying to explain. I hope you understand. So yes, you chalk it this way as shown. So we're going to be putting the lining aside while we move to the next thing. So the next thing is to work on the African print. And the African print, I'm going to be cutting in length and in breadth as well. So the length, it determines on how full you want it to be because we're going to be running gather stitches. So for me, I'm going to be using the length of the fabric that I have currently, which is about 3 yards. And I also added about 25 inches to the 3 yards. So that's 3 yards plus 25 inches. That is the length of my fabric. And then the breadth of my fabric, I did 8.5. That is because I want it to flow a little bit on the next layer. So I did 8.5, and that is what I'm cutting out. So I'm going to also, you can see the way it is being done. It is actually unfold on the other end. So I'm going to open it out and then combine it so I can get 3 yards 25 inches. And I'm going to use this to cut the rest as a pattern guide. So this is what I have, and I also ran gather stitches on the fabric. If you do not know how to make gathers, you can request in the comment section and I can come through for you. So yeah, you drag on one rope to make your gather. So this is going to take time. I'm going to do it off camera. So yes, I've done the gathers. I've gathered everything. Yeah, that's the right one. I've gathered everything on the fabric, and this is what we have. So now I'm going to be showing you how the step is going to go. The first green would be for the hem, the red would be in the middle, and the one with the white would be on top. So that is what we're going to be doing. Now let's bring back the lining piece, where we're going to be pinning down the fabric according to how we want it layered. So as I said earlier, we're going to be starting from the hem, and I'm using this African print that is Adire in green. So I'm going to be pinning it, but first I'm going to be locating the midpoint, which I've already notched my lining earlier. To notch your lining, you just need to put the two ends together to get a midpoint. When you get a midpoint, you notch it. Then I'm ruling down to the end because I want to easily identify where the midpoint is. So that is what I have just done. Sorry, my chalk is actually not showing. I think it's same color with the lining. I didn't realize it, pardon me. While I was doing it, I was actually seeing it. So I will just begin by pinning it in the middle, and that is what I will be doing right now. This is what we have after pinning, and I'm going to show you how it will be after stitching. So this is what it's going to look like after stitching. So I'm going to take it to the machine now and also stitch the second and the third step before bringing it back. So that is what I'm going to do right now. And also the last step, I do not need to place it, I just need to fix it directly to the waist because the band will cover it up. So this is what we have after fixing the 3 steps together on the lining piece. So I'm showing you everything. So now the next step is to close the back opening, and we're going to be starting with the first African print, which is the one at the M. So we're going to be stitching first only the fabrics without stitching the lining for now. So at the tip of your stitches at the very end, you're going to be leaving about half inch, 0.5 inch allowance that you're not going to stitch on both ends. That is so you can easily stitch the fabrics. So we can stitch the fabrics together first. You do that for the first one, the second one, and the third one. Then after that, you bring together the lining and you stitch straight to the end. So I'm showing you guys what I've done after the stitches. This is what I have after stitching both the African print and the lining piece. I'm also going to show you how I stitched the lining in the. So when you are done stitching the Ankara fabric, it is very easy for you to stitch the lining. You're just going to run through your stitches straight to the end. Now we have some openings around the African print. What you're going to do is just to run your stitches directly, the same stitches you started from the very beginning on the lining piece. You run it straight through and it closes every hole that you have there. That is just what you need to do. So after that, I'm going to be working on the waist. So to work on the waist, you're going to run your tape through the waist and measure everything we have. That is how you're going to cut out your band. So my band, like I said earlier, my band is 1.5. I added 0.5 inches for the stitch allowance at the waist. And then I'm going to also measure out about 0.5 inches at the tip of the band. That is where the place that is on fold. So I'm going to be measuring 0.5, 0.5, pardon me. I'm chalking 0.5 at the very tip. Chalking the 0.5, I'm going to run a straight stitch around that area. After that, I'm going to get the midpoint of the band. So you put the band together and then you try to get the midpoint. That is exactly what I am doing. Arranging the bands properly so there will be no mistakes, exactly as shown, so as to get the midpoint, and then you can notch it to secure the midpoint of the band, because we're going to be attaching the midpoint to the midpoint of the skirt. The midpoint of the band is going to be attached to the midpoint of the skirt. So I'm also going to get the midpoint of the skirt because I can't find what I notched earlier around the waist. So I would get the midpoint using the back stitch as a guideline to get the midpoint for the skirt. So I would attach the midpoint of the band and the midpoint of the skirt together as shown, using a pin to secure it in place. So after that, I've also closed all the spaces that we have here at the back. I've run stitches through and the spaces are now closed. There are no more spaces around that area as shown. I also ran the straight stitches around the band where I was marking 0.5 inches earlier. I also around there. So now I'm going to secure the band around all around as shown. And at both ends of the band, I'm going to be leaving about 2 inches opening where I can easily pass through my elastic. So I'm going to be using this 1 inch elastic because my band weight, my band allowance is 1.5. I already took out 0.5 above and 0.5 beneath, so I'm going to be using 1 inch. So this is what I have after running the stitches and also overlocking around the waist. So now I'm going to pass the elastic through the casing that has already been made for the elastic around the middle part of the band. So yes, that is what I'm going to be doing next. So to get the elastic for your waist circumference, you're going to be using your exact waist circumference, and then you're going to be taking out some inches. It depends on the kind of band you're using. This elastic I'm using is very stretchy, so I'm going to be taking about 3 inches out of my actual waist measurement. My actual waist measurement is around 29, so I'm going to be taking out 3 inches. I'm going to be having 26 inches, but I decided to cut out about 27 inches. I did cut out about 27 inches because at the end of the day, I'm still going to be sewing some parts away, which is going to be about 1 inch, half inch on both ends as shown. I'd already passed through the elastic, so these are ends the ends around the openings that I'm going to be running a straight stitch as shown. Then after that as well, I'm going to join it around the waist area where it's overlocked. The next thing to do is to run straight stitches in the center part as shown, and while running stitches on the machine, you're going to be dragging it. These are the pieces cut out I'm going to be using for the drawstrings, because we're also going to be attaching the drawstrings. It is 1 inch in wideness and the length is of choice. I've finished sewing that and getting the drawstrings, so I'm going to be running through the drawstrings. So I'm also going to get the center part of the skirt because I can't find the one I did earlier after overlocking. So from the center part, I'm going to go to the left side direction in about 1 inch, that is what I'm currently doing. I'm measuring 1 inch from the center part on both ends, 1 inch, 1 inch on the left and the right side. That is where I'm going to be opening. Again, I'm going to be giving it a very tiny openings around that area so I can pass through the drawstrings, and this is very easy. So I'm going to be making use of my scissors to make that opening. So you're going to cut it, since there is another sew in the middle, there is a sew above and below it. So while making that opening, the opening should be between the two stitches that you have above and below. So that is what I'm going to be doing for the both ends of the openings, exactly what it's there exactly as shown. So I'm also going to be doing exactly that on the other end of the markings. So exactly what we did on pass through just made. And this is what we have, and we're just one step away from being done with our skirt. So let's get that done. So now I'm going to be cutting out the lining at the very end of the African print. And after that, I overlocked the rough edges to avoid it from fraying. If you cannot overlock it, you can still manage it like that. And with that, we've come to the end of our layered African print skirt. Thank you so much for watching. Do not forget to subscribe.